When you think of NASCAR, what's the first race that comes to your mind? I think almost everyone will say the Daytona 500, the Great American Race. But it's not just that race alone that makes the event significant. What separates the Daytona 500 from the other 35 points races on the schedule is the week-plus long build-up to it, or formerly the week-long build-up. At its peak, what became known as Speedweeks consisted of a mass gathering of multiple series arriving at the 2.5-mile facility off a 3-month off-season with one goal: winning the most prestigious race of their respective division and cementing their names in racing history. But to get to that point, it took a course of survival and warfare, with all the headlines building about things like what manufacturer showed up with the most speed, who worked together the strongest, how did the months-long preparation back at the shop pay off on the aerodynamics of the bodies, who would top the speed charts, who would sit on the pole, and who would race, yes, race, their way into the Sunday main event. It was kicking off with an exhibition consisting of only the pole winners of the previous season in a shootout-style format to give a sense of pride to the team and driver that finished first, and only first, getting the ball rolling for what to look forward to the rest of the week. It was being introduced to new teams, drivers, and paint schemes for the season to come, and who would showcase the fastest solo speed and starting on the pole for the biggest race of the year, making the first statement to the rest of the field. The 45-plus entries being split into 2 short races on Thursday to set the rest of the field, and the bulk of the drama being centered towards the middle of the pack to see what underdog ragtag team could steal the show and vault their way into the starting lineup among the coveted 40-plus car field, while others sulked in defeat and had to live with the agony of missing out for 364 days.
AJ, I think your face says it all right now.
Yeah, pretty much sucks as bad as it can. I mean, that's
It was who could keep their Daytona 500 car intact and not have to make the dreaded move to the hauler and bring out the backup.
How much does this affect your chances of winning the 500?
I don't know, rocket scientist. I mean, I'm sitting here with a backup car. What do you think?
Can you win the 500 from the back in the backup car?
Absolutely not. Never happened.
Then it was all that. All 7 days of chatter, unknowns, storylines, contenders, pretenders, wild cards, and feel-good stories culminating into a 4-hour, 200-lap journey that was a season in itself. All the ups, the downs, the twists and turns, the improbable. The captivating.
Side by side, right to the line. Big crash, here they come, checkered flag. Perfect.
The heartbreaking.
Dale Earnhardt.
Here comes Coke down on the inside. Earnhardt has problems. Unbelievable.
The unthinkable.
But after the accident in turn 4 at the end of the Daytona 500.
All of this capped off by glory, pure joy, overcome with emotions.
Oh, I'm gonna cry.
Remembered forever, not always in pleasant fashion. To some, it was worth it. To most, it wasn't.
We can't adjust. We can't make our cars drive like we want. They just killed the race at Daytona.
At least it used to be like this. We're a far cry from that now. A far cry. Here's a look at the 2023 Speed Week schedule, the year this video was published. It's bare-boned, a skeleton version of what used to be. Cutting back on not just the biggest race of the year, but the biggest week of the year. In every major sport, the biggest event of the year is typically at the end, where a champion is crowned. That's not the case in NASCAR. It's the opposite. Why is it that way? Because that's just how it happened. It all goes back to the timeline of the foundation of the sport and the evolution from the very shores of Daytona Beach to the 2.5-mile superspeedway constructed and established in 1959. But also in every major sport, their respective biggest event is the most promoted. The Super Bowl, the World Series, March Madness, the Masters. Every year as those events approach on the calendar, your TVs get invaded by advertisements of these events and what makes them appealing. You get an idea of what to expect and enough time to plan for it. There's one thing in common with all of these events too. They've grown. They've expanded over time. They haven't scaled back. Because they know in order to grow their product, they have to enlarge their biggest events to as many people as possible. How are you going to get fans to parade in by the boatload in campers and RVs for half a week? How are TV partners going to rake in revenue and ratings with their broadcasts cut in half? How is there supposed to be anticipation and storylines with just 3 events and no substance between them? NASCAR is doing themselves a disservice by giving the fans less content revolving around their biggest event of the year. You might be wondering how we got here. How did we go from more than 7 days of on-track action to just 5? You can point to the year 2020. What NASCAR pulled off that season during the pandemic was remarkable, but the underlying case of no practice or qualifying on a weekly basis opened the manufacturer's eyes that it could be pulled off. They didn't need 2 hours of practice a week to put on a race. That may be true, but what goes unnoticed is the loss of everything leading up to it, which is just as imperative to each race as the race itself. I don't like comparing NASCAR to stick and ball sports, so I'll use another motorsport for an example, IndyCar. Along the same lines as NASCAR, one race sticks out to everyone across the globe, race fan or not, the Indy 500. It's not just the biggest race on their schedule, but the biggest spectacle in racing. And what do? They dedicate an entire month to it, the month of May. Take a look at the events leading up to this thing. Practice after practice after practice, 2 qualifying sessions, and a litany of advertising campaigns. You may ask, why all these practice sessions? What's the point? Because it's the biggest race of the year, point blank. It builds storylines. It gives teams a chance to optimize the cars they've prepared for months for their biggest race of the year. You think these teams, drivers, and sponsors that invest so much into them want to make this a crapshoot and watch months of preparation go in the gutter after a minimal build-up with no good feel of what to expect? The pandemic didn't cause them or Formula One to even budge on their approach to race weekends, let alone the most lucrative events they host, because they know what their product is structured around. NASCAR is structured around the Daytona 500, whether they want to prioritize it or not. That is, right now it's that way. Without the gradual anticipation building over the course of a week, the prestige of the Great American Race becomes obsolete. It's just like any other weekend. Why else would there be 2 separate races to determine the starting lineup itself 3 days prior? Because it's supposed to be a big deal. It shows that each of the 40 spots in the lineup are precious. You truly have to earn each one, whether it's first or 40th. What other race would you get this kind of emotion for simply making the race? Nowadays, it's a struggle to even fill up the field to the standard size, let alone teams showing up on the outside looking in. NASCAR can focus on street courses, dirt races, and rain tires all at once, but they can never forget what launched them onto the mainstream platform, the Daytona 500 herself. It's been beaten into the ground, but the first ever flag-to-flag broadcast in 1979 while the entire East Coast was trapped in a snowstorm changed everything. That's not a coincidence. You can expand to other demographics of society and broaden the spectrum internationally, but you can't downgrade your own headliner. Chicago isn't begging for NASCAR. The dirt racing has its flaws, but Speedweeks is Speedweeks, and that should never change. Do your fan base a favor and give it the pedestal it deserves. The series will be better off for it, because you don't get moments like this.
Jeff Gordon's not done it once, not twice, but 3 times.
He's going to make it. Dale Jarrett's going to win the Daytona 500. All right. Oh, look at.
Without moments like this.
This is an emotional moment for Dennis and Mary Lou Hamlin.
Denny, welcome to Daytona's victory lane.
I can't believe it.
Bring back Speedweeks.